All right, so today we are graphing quadratics that are in standard or quote unquote general form. So there's a couple of things that we can do here. So if we want to graph this, there are two ways we can approach it. We can try to three ways. We can try to factor, we can complete the square, or we can find the vertex. Now here I'm going to have us complete the square because that's something that we know. And once we complete the square, you'll see what happens. So our first step, I'm going to set 3x squared plus 6x minus 9 equal to 0. I've got to move that 9 to the other side and factor out my 3. X squared plus 2x. Remember, I moved the 9 first, so I'm not taking a 3 out of the 9. And I'm going to add something here, and I'm going to add 3 times something here. So take your b value, divide it by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So here we have it. So that factors into x plus 1 squared equals 12. I'll have to move that 12 back over to be in vertex form. X plus 1 squared minus 12. So here we have vertex form. So our vertex here is -1, -12, and my axis of symmetry is x equals -1. My a value here is 3. So if I were to graph that, we would take our 1, 3, 5 and multiply those values by 3. Now, as you can see here to the right, my graph doesn't go down to -12, so we don't have to graph it. Just this is one method of graphing in standard form. So completing the square to get to vertex form. There's also another way we can approach this problem. We also are able to, so this really comes from completing the square with general form. We're not going to do that, but I have ax squared plus bx plus c. You could also, to find the x coordinate of your vertex, take the opposite of b divided by 2a. So if I do that with the question above, the opposite of b is -6 divided by 2 times a. My a value was 3, and I get -1. And sure enough, that's the x coordinate of my vertex from above. That's also my axis of symmetry. And then to find the y value, I would plug that back in. So f of -1 equals 3 times -1 squared plus 6 times -1 minus 9. -1 squared is 1 times 3. I've got 3 minus 6 minus 9, which takes us to -12. So I can also find my vertex by doing the opposite of b over 2a. And we'll do it both ways here. All right, so number 2, it says, how did you approach the problem? So you have two ways. You can either complete the square or you can do opposite of b over 2a. That's up to you. I find that doing the opposite of b, which is 4 over 2 times 2 here, is a little bit easier. So I get my x coordinate to be 1 of my vertex. Now I can substitute that back in to find my y. So f of 1 so 2 minus 4, it's -2 minus 1 takes me to -3. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 1. And this we can go ahead and graph because it'll fit on our paper. So 1, -3. My a value is 2, so that means I take my 1, 3, 5, and we multiply those values by 2. So over 1 up 2, over 1 and up 6. So our quadratic, our parabola, looks as so. Here we are. Don't worry about how did you / could you approach this problem. Like I said, you could do the opposite of b over 2a, or we can complete the square. And completing the square will get us to the same thing. All right. We're only going to do a and b here. So it says complete the square to write the following in vertex form, then identify the vertex in the axis of symmetry. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. Now it says use it completing the square. I'm going to show you two ways that we can go about it. So first we'll go and complete the square here. So again, set this equal to 0. I'll move the 3 over, and I also need to factor out the 2, but remember I'm factoring out the 2 after I already moved that 3 over. I'm going to take, and I also need to remember that I'm adding something here. So b divided by 2 and squaring it, I have 1 and I have 1. So 2x plus 1 squared equals -1. But again, I set this equal to 0, so I need to move that 1 back to the other side. So I have f of x equals 2x plus 1 squared plus 1. So then my vertex there is -1, 1, and my axis of symmetry is x equals 1. All right, sorry about that. I was just making sure it was recording. Okay, so then here, I'm going to show you a different way we can go ahead and approach it. So if you don't like completing the square, we really don't have to do that here. I know my a value is 1, so I know that I'm going to have g of x equals -3 times something squared. That's what happens when I complete the square. Well, I could also find the vertex because remember I have x and here's my h and my k. Well, we could find the vertex by doing x equals the opposite of b over 2a. So -12 divided by -6 takes me to 2. That tells me x minus 2 goes in parentheses here. Now to find the y coordinate, take that 2 and substitute it in. So you have -3, 2 squared, plus 12 times 2, minus 15. 2 squared is 4, times -3, we got -12, plus 24, minus 15. I said 24, but I wrote 12. So -12 plus 24 takes you to 12, and 12 minus 15 is -3. So -3. Remember, it's the opposite of what goes inside of your parentheses and the same as what goes out. So you could solve this problem like this as well. So finding the vertex using that opposite of b over 2a and then writing it in vertex form. Both ways are completely fine. It's really up to you. So 2, -3 and x equals 2. And same thing here. If you try to do it that way, you know it's going to be 2 times something squared. We'll do x equals the opposite of b over 2a, and you get -1. So that means plus 1 goes in parentheses, and plug in that -1, and it's going to spit out that 1, so you know to have a plus 1 there. All right, C and D are a little trickier. We're going to skip those. We can talk about those more when I get back. But as for here, a couple of things. So just a quick reflection of what we briefly talked about. So you have 3 options. You can graph from standard form to find your vertex. X equals the opposite of b over 2 times a. And then plug in to find y. You can factor. That brings you to intercept form, so that's what we talked about yesterday. Here, to find your vertex, x equals p plus q divided by 2. And then again, we plug in to find y. Or your last option, you can complete the square. That will give you vertex form, where your vertex is h, k. So you have those three options there. All right, we have a word problem, and then we are done. All right, so Xander was frustrated with his math teacher, so he threw his math book straight up in the air. The height of the textbook in feet from the moment it was thrown could be modeled by the following equation. So this should be h of t. There's t's in the equation, so this really should be h of t, where h of t is measured in feet and t, not I, is measured in seconds. Now, a couple of things to know. I have a negative here, so that tells me my parabola is opening down. So this is representing that book being thrown in the air. How many seconds after the book is thrown does it reach its maximum height? Well, here my vertex is going to be my maximum, so I need to find that. I can find that by doing the opposite of b. I'm going to use t instead of x over 2 times a. So if I were to simplify this, we get 6 seconds. So after 6 seconds, that's when we reach that maximum height. Now to figure out what that maximum height is, I'm going to take that 6 and substitute it in. And if you do all of this math, you can use your calculator. You should get 581 feet. Now that's our vertex. That's the coordinates of our vertex. Now when it's asking how long till it hits the ground, that's when we're looking for when this thing crosses the x-axis, whether it's here and here. So it crosses the x-axis in two solutions, but we need to determine the one that we're going to pick. So a couple of ways. You can try to factor. You can use the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is what I did. So negative 192 plus or minus the square root of 192 squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So if you do the math here, you can again use your calculator. You're going to get two solutions. And it comes out to be negative 0.026 and 12.03. Now t represents seconds. Time can't be negative, so our solution would be 12.03. Whew. All right, so again, don't worry about those two questions that we skipped. If you need to pause the video so you can write things down, please do. You are working on your 5-2 day 2 homework. So finding the coordinates of the vertex, whether you choose to complete the square or opposite of b over 2a, here you might need to use a different rule. You're graphing a couple, identifying the domain and range, increasing and decreasing. That's some review. Just a little heads up. You're always going to use your x values for increasing and decreasing. Remember, that's when we talked about our roller coaster. Here, this might be a little messy, meaning your vertex might be a little messy. Again, you can complete the square or opposite of b over 2a, and then a word problem. All right, I will see you all tomorrow. Make sure you ask questions when I see you on Wednesday. All right.